There's a ton of noise out there. So how do you get decision makers to pay attention to your brand? Start a podcast and invite your ideal clients to be guests on your show. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to B2B Growth. I am your host for today's episode, Nikki Ivy with Sweetfish Media. Guys, I've got with me today Gavin Drake, who is Chief Marketing Officer at Ease Inc. Gavin, how you doing today?
Hey there, Nikki. Thank you for having me on.
Good. No, I'm excited. So we're going to be talking about, a letter to your first day self, reflecting back on your first 90 days as a CMO. I'm so excited to get that insight and share it with our listeners. But Gavin, before we get into all that, I'd love it if you would just give us a little bit of background on yourself and what you and the folks at Ease Inc. are up to these days.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in marketing now for 25 years and, just kind of discovered marketing at university. I actually went to study physics and business studies because it kind of seemed like an interesting mix, doing management accounting and quantum physics and alternating lectures. But that was kind of my first introduction to marketing and was just completely drawn to the idea that this function of marketing and marketing strategy could change a business. That just fascinated me immediately and ended up falling into B2B technology. And that's what I've been doing for a number of years. And most recently with my last company for 14 years. So doing the new CMO thing, first 90 days, is pretty new for me because it's been at least 9 years since I changed position.
Wow. So tell us a little bit, before we get into the particular challenges that presents and some of the things that the insights that you took away from your first quarter or so there. Tell us a little bit about what Ease Inc. is and what you guys do.
Yeah, so it's a fast-growing software company. They're based in sunny Orange County, California, and develop a cloud platform that enables manufacturers to digitize processes on the plant floor that are typically very manual processes, like around layered process audits, health and safety audits. I'm working with customers, everything from aerospace to furniture manufacturers, and their largest market is actually automotive. I'll make it a little bit more real for you. If you built IKEA furniture and maybe you've got 5 things to build and you build the first one, you really rigorously follow the instruction manual to make sure you build it right. And then you do item 2 and you kind of think, I've got this. And by item 5, you're flying through. But somewhere in that, you actually put a screw or a bolt in the wrong way around, or you get the piece the wrong way around, and then you've got to go back to the beginning and fix it. And that's kind of what layered process audits are in manufacturing. Rather than inspecting the final goods, you're inspecting the process to hopefully make sure the quality of the final output is good. And most manufacturers do that manually today. They do it with pen and paper. They maybe put it into Excel spreadsheets to look at the results, but it's a highly manual process going around manufacturing plants and production lines looking at these processes. So what Ease's platform does is enables them to take that mobile, digitize the whole process. And as a result, they get much higher completion rates. They get insights into how the audits are progressing. And ultimately, they hopefully improve quality. They improve reduction in scrap materials, all of those things that actually contribute to the bottom line.
So it's very what you guys do is so specialized, or the folks that you serve, right, are doing such specialized processes that I would imagine, along with the standard challenges of having your first 90 days as a CMO, that there are some particular challenges that this would have presented for you. Talk a little bit about those for us.
Yeah, I mean, given the amount of technology that exists in business today, the plant floor in manufacturing is an area that is still very devoid of technology. For most manufacturers, it's a complete blind spot to them. They just don't have insight into what's happening at a human level on the factory floor. So, yeah, that presents some big challenges. You've got change management challenges and kind of people's receptiveness to technology. But I would say the biggest challenge is just getting to the buyers. If I was selling to IT or if I was selling to MarTech, you can get to those buyers really easily through a wide variety of sources. But trying to get to this particular buyer and even identify where the plants are, so it's not like I can even find a database of this automotive manufacturer has got 320 plants. You've got to start trying to figure out where in Ohio they happen to have plants and what they do before you even get as far as finding the data of who the person might be you need to speak with. So from a top of funnel perspective, biggest challenge is absolutely getting to the buyers and the decision makers.
Yeah, no, I would imagine. So how did you, I'm curious at this point, what are some of the approaches that you guys deploy that kind of make that happen?
Well, honestly, part of kind of bringing in first CMO to ease is to start to solve that challenge. And we're just embarking on a campaign, really a very tightly focused account-based marketing program into those automotive suppliers. I think what's really interesting that I didn't appreciate on the automotive industry before I started here is that most of the manufacturers like GM and Fiat Chrysler, 95% of what goes into their cars gets manufactured by someone else, right? They assemble those components.
Right.
So you've got these multi-billion-dollar companies, some of which you may have heard of, like Continental Tires, and probably lots of companies you've never heard of that are multi-billion-dollar companies with hundreds of plants around the world that are producing all of this. So there are some very unique data sources and industry partners and people that we can go to start making those connections. But honestly, it's going to be a very tight account-based marketing approach and a lot of experimentation. I think the only way you can make this work is to be prepared to A, take risks, and B, try lots of different engagement techniques to see what works for that persona. So what we're doing in parallel is actually a brand project with a Denver-based agency called Monegal. And that is to really deep dive on our personas here and look at vision, look at messaging, positioning, and really kind of cement our understanding of this particular buyer persona, but also expand that buyer persona. This is very much a bottoms-up sell rather than a top-down sell right now.
For sure.
And we think there's an opportunity to turn this ultimately into a top-down sell in these organizations, but we really are selling plant to plant as opposed to selling top-down in these organizations. So yes, you can imagine that could involve a lot of phone work. And one of the first things that we worked on was our BDR team. That could involve direct mail, email. That could involve very targeted online advertising using some of the latest techniques for trying to get to particular buyers in particular geographic locations.
And tell me again how long has Ease been around?
Ease is interesting in that the company's been around since the 80s, but not doing what they do now. They were started by a couple of Brits that moved over to California and ended up starting this company and ran it as a small company for a number of years until it got acquired in 2015 by a private equity firm. And so this solution, which is called Beacon, was launched into the market in 2016. So they've only been in market with this particular platform for the past 3 years, and it's now the vast majority of what we do and kind of our future focus as well.
Right. Yeah. And the reason why I asked that is because a lot of the challenges and the approaches that you guys use sound very startup-like, right? And so I was like, I thought it's been around for a while, but I see that makes sense now. So with this iteration in the market right now, it's fairly new, and so there is a lot of work to be done, which I imagine was kind of maybe a little daunting for a first in your first few days as a CMO. Talk about some of the things that early on, your first couple of days, that surprised you about what you were walking into.
I think what you'd expect when you look at a company that is kind of a startup and is trying to move into this high growth mode is just that you end up seeing a lack of process and structure, right? You can grow initially through a lot of luck. But once you want to really get to that high growth, scalable demand, there's a lot of things that you have to have in place in order to scale the demand and really understand the end-to-end lead life cycle. And so trying to get some of those things in place, you could argue that some of those are easy things to fix, but when you start talking about we need to implement new lead life cycles, we need to implement territory planning. I mean, kind of all the basics that you need for a scalable demand gen infrastructure. Yeah, a lot of things to get your head around when obviously from a marketing challenge, the biggest thing you want to work on is demand gen, but resisting the temptation just to dive into huge demand gen campaigns before you've really got the foundation built.
Today's growth story is all about search engine marketing. The company we're highlighting is SentinelOne. This challenger cybersecurity brand was set out to disrupt the endpoint protection space. Their brand was top-notch, their product was innovative, but they were struggling to gain traction online in an already developed industry. Then they found Directive Consulting, a B2B search marketing agency. Within the first quarter of working with Directive, SentinelOne was able to increase their organic traffic by 128%. and overall lead volume by an outstanding 251%. Now, I have a hunch that Directive can get these kind of results for you too. So head over to directiveconsulting.com and request a totally free custom proposal. That's directiveconsulting.com. All right, let's get back to this interview.
One thing that I wonder a lot when I talk to CMOs, I've done this a lot more now since April when I came on with Sweetfish, but I had my entire career working at startups, which I think was probably a myth, right? I spent so much of my time talking to and learning from sales leadership or learning from, let's say, a CRO or a CEO and not really spending a lot of time with marketing leadership, when now that I'm getting the chance to do that, it's bridging so many gaps that existed in my understanding of how the whole revenue thing works. So when you get to an organization, it's your first day as a CMO, what are the types of things you think about in terms of your ability to impact the culture at an organization?
Yeah, I've been recently reading a number of books on culture. One that I really love is a book called The Chief Joy Officer, which I think is a fantastic read. And so it's a challenge when you come in because no one knows you. And so you've obviously got to try and build credibility with the team at that point, but ultimately to help the team understand that your job is to make them successful, right? That's really the culture that you want to build. We're all in this together. We've got competitors outside of these walls that are gunning for us every day. Our job has got to be to bring our A game to work every day and to understand the vision of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to build. I mean, in your first 90 days, it's clearly a lot of listening. So you have that time period where you can really try and understand the challenges from each department, so looking cross-functionally, talking with sales, talking with R&D, with finance, understanding their perception of marketing, what they think the biggest challenges are for the marketing team, what they think needs to be addressed. But ultimately, you've got to start to put together that plan that you think makes sense. And I heard a great quote the other day. Someone was just talking about making changes in marketing, and that if you don't get resistance and pushback to changes, you should probably ask about the changes you're making, because when you come into a new company, people are obviously expecting that you're going to be making changes. And some of those changes have to be things that are not in line with what they're expecting, right? Right. So you're going to get that pushback in certain areas. And in some cases, that'll be bigger than it is in others.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's something that I would anticipate would happen. But what I wonder, though, is how do you prioritize what needs to get changed and when? It seems like that might be one of the toughest parts starting out on your first 90 days as a CMO. How'd you handle that?
Yeah, I tried to parallel some tracks is one answer. So one of the things that we clearly needed some work on was brand, not just visual identity. Visual identity, most people don't understand, comes, 4 or 5 steps down the brand hierarchy, but really understanding who we are, what we're about, what our vision is, and how we're going to communicate that consistently to our prospects and to our customers. And so that was one of the reasons for bringing in an outside agency to help us with that, because that enabled me really to focus on some of the other things that needed work on internally where that could parallel. And I think there's probably a perception when a new CMO comes in, the first thing they want to do is change the brand and the logo. And honestly, those are fun projects, but it's not really what you want to be doing because you see the top challenges that need addressing. But equally, you also say, hey, if we're going to make a big investment in growing this company, no matter how far we think we've gone over the past 3 years, where we're going to go over the next 5 years is even more important. And so we have to make sure that the brand foundation is in place, that the demand gen foundation is in place. So, I knew that the biggest challenge for the company was going to be top of funnel. And addressing top of funnel, looking around the company, one of the best ways that we could address that quickly was through our BDR team, which rolls up into marketing. So having a look at the process and structure that we had in place for that particular team and how they're prioritizing their prospecting activities, define playbooks, target accounts, all of those kind of basics of process and structure, just setting expectations, right? What are your expectations on how many demo appointments you're expecting to set each month? And then aligning their compensation against the expectations. And those things kind of seem so basic in terms, but make such a difference. And the team immediately appreciate that level of clarity in what they're doing. And then making sure the team's got the right tools and the right training. So I love Jeb Blunt's Fanatical Prospecting book. So we actually have them on the Fanatical Prospecting training course right now, where they're doing role play and developing their voicemails and their because statements and objection handling. So kind of getting that in place, but also getting them the right tools. For example, putting in tools that will help them prospect. We know that we're not going to find a data source that will give us the quality managers at all of our target companies. But if I can save them 30 or 40% of their manual time by giving them the right tools to get some of that data, then that's going to be a win for them. So that team is already thriving, doing really well. And August will definitely be by far their best month ever in terms of appointment setting, outbound calls. So, and lots of potential there still. So that was kind of an example of, yes, we've got broader plans in terms of demand gen and account-based marketing programs, but having a BDR team already in place that really just needed a little bit more structure and support was a quick win way that we could get that top of the funnel going.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I really love that your BDR team rolls up into marketing. That's not always the case. A lot of the time it's they report to sales, and then it's not, in my experience, not as effective.
Yeah, for me, it's critical, right? Because for marketing to hand off a qualified leads to sales, it has to be person qualified. Automation and lead scoring is only ever going to take you so far in terms of getting to propensity to buy. You have to have a calling function in front of that. And for me, it's the best way to align sales and marketing, right? You've no longer got a conversation with sales that is abstract about data. It's specific about this BDR set this appointment. Why wasn't it a good appointment? Or why was it a good appointment? You can have real conversations, and then you can start to collaborate around getting into accounts together.
I love it. Man, you were up and running. You were up and running after your first 90 days. So I'll ask you before we move on, for one, if you could go back to your first day self and give one key piece of advice, what would that be?
I would say be realistic about what you can achieve in 90 days, because you're going to see a lot of things that you feel you need to get done, and you want to get them all done extremely quickly, but you kind of have to have a dose of realism around what's possible. I bought a house with my wife a couple of years ago, and it was a complete renovation project, had stunning mountain views, but the house itself was everything needed doing. And when you kind of first walk in a house, you see everything that needs doing, right? You think, I've got to change this, and I've got to change this. The problem is when you've lived with it for 3 or 4 months or 6 months or 12 months, you start to say, actually, that wallpaper looks all right. Oh, the bathroom's okay, right? And you start to change your view. And I think it's so important, even if you're not going to get everything done in your first 90 days, make sure you note down everything you believe needs doing and keep going back to that list, because it's too easy to lose that first day perspective.
Excellent advice. I could actually use that advice as far as, because I'm not that far along into my tenure here at Sweet Fish or in life. And so I really love it. I love the way you laid that out for us. So now, Gavin, that I've successfully picked your brain and seen what I could get out of it, it is time for you to tell us what you put into it. Now, I know you mentioned Jeb Blunt's Medical Prospecting. That one actually just made it into my Audible library, so I'm a little bit ways through that one as well. But what else? What else is informing your approach that's just got you excited these days?
Yeah, I mean, typically I'm thinking about culture, I'm thinking about brand, I'm thinking about demand gen, right? Those are all things that really get me going. So if you haven't ever read Brands and Bullshit, you should recognize that one. You may need to bleep that out on the podcast, but is a fantastic book on the basics of branding end to end. One book that I'm really loving right now is a book called Play Bigger, which is all on category building. And you know, that obviously plays in with a lot of the work that we're doing here from a branding perspective. So those are two that I've definitely enjoyed recently. And then clearly lots of podcasts. There are so many good marketing podcasts out there just to listen from industry peers and kind of just get real, right? Because the challenge sometimes with books is they can be a bit theoretical, and getting those conversations going with your peers and really understanding you're all facing the same challenges, and just learning from each other is just critical.
Listen to Gavin, guys. He gets it. So much like me, I know folks listening have become fast fans of yours, and they're going to want to know how to keep up with you. Let us know, Gavin, how can folks connect with you?
Yeah, they can find me on LinkedIn, and my profile URL there is Gavin Drake Marketing, but just do a search for Gavin Drake and that should find me.
All right, sweet, will do. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We'll have to have you on after your first 12 months maybe and see,
we'll see how we're doing.
What's changed and what you found helpful. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Nikki.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.